Good evening and welcome to the penthouse of the spiritual bungalow. Hello, Udis.
Hello. Today is the feast of St. Augustine, and so an appropriate opening would be Great art thou, O Lord, and greatly to be praised. Great is thy power, and thy wisdom is infinite. And man, who being a part of what thou hast created, is desirous to praise thee. This man, bearing about his own mortality with him, carrying about him a testimony of his own sin, even this testimony that God resisteth the proud. Yet this man, this part of what thou hast created, is desirous to praise thee, and thou so provokest him that he even delighteth to praise thee. For thou hast created us for thyself, and our heart cannot be quieted till it may find repose in thee. Grant me, Lord, to know and understand what I ought first to do, whether to call upon thee or to praise thee. And which ought to be first, to know thee or to call upon thee? But who can rightly call upon thee that is yet ignorant of thee? For such an one may instead of thee call upon another. Or art thou rather first called upon, that thou mayest so come to be known? But how then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe without a preacher? And again, they shall praise the Lord that seek after him. For they that seek shall find, and finding they shall praise him. Thee will I seek, O Lord, calling upon thee, and I will call upon thee, believing in thee. For thou hast been declared unto us. My faith, O Lord, calls upon thee, which thou hast given me, which thou hast inspired into me, even by the humanity of thy Son, and by the ministry of thy preacher.
Beginning of the Confessions.
I know it seems a little cliche, but
Can I read something that's a little bit more obscure from Augustine?
you can.
Since
So
we're-
so for our viewers out there, we are doing a complete and utter Leroy Jenkins this evening. We have done absolutely no preparation, and we just went live as soon as we hooked up our webcam. So we're
just giving her.
we're just giving her
Just
Leroy
give her.
Jenkins.
Just give her. So, one of the things I find really interesting about Augustine is that he's meanwhile, like erstwhile, like very relatable to moderns, but then also very much an ancient figure in the way that he thinks and the way that he sort of illustrates. And I think the City of God is a very typical work to illustrate that point. I mean, especially the ancient-minded aspect of Augustine, because he really isn't our contemporary as much as sometimes we might like to think him to be. Since he is writing, rhetorically and is very effective at speaking to the emotions, because human passions don't change, and so the relatability is there, but just the way that he thinks and the way and his sort of worldview is very much of the classical world. Yeah, it's even though he's kind of a late antique, that's still very much intact.
He's the bridge. He's that
yeah.
bridge between antiquity and the Middle Ages.
Yeah,
and he also ends up being the bridge between the Middle Ages and Counter-Reformation Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
Through his many disciples, amongst whom the really numerous, besides the fathers of the Council of Trent and men like Serapando, the papal legate, the Augustinian papal legate, but also men like Pico Mirandola or men like Erasmus having edited and published almost all of his works, and the other great scholastics who come down as well. All the branches of scholasticism have their roots in St. Augustine. The Augustinian tradition comes from St. Augustine through the medium of St. Thomas Aquinas,
right,
through his pupil Giles of Rome, And of course, St. Thomas is a deeply Augustinian thinker, and Duns Scotus is a deeply Augustinian figure, and St. Bonaventure is a deeply Augustinian figure. And so at the same time, and the disputes over grace that come out of the Reformation and then into the Counter Reformations is very Augustinian as well, and
Yeah, I
deeply
wonder
influenced by
where the
Augustine.
sort of the dislike or the tendency of an Augustinian strain in the Byzantium sort of sentiment arose from. Is this sort of a similar sentiment to sort of some of the anti-intellectualism that
Yes, it
yeah.
arises after it arises with the anti-intellectual tradition. Augustine is translated by Maximus Planudes into. I think a little bit of Augustine is translated by Maximus Planudes into Greek, and there's been some scholarship done showing that Gregory Palamas was actually influenced by Augustine, including a section of some of his work. I think it's the 150 chapters. A section of some of his work, which actually is a word for word quotation without the citation, as one does not want to do, a word for word quotation of the translation of Augustine that was done into Greek.
Yeah, interesting. So one of the passages that I found interesting was when he was might seem a little bit base on my part to focus on this this one passage, but where he sort of analyzes or speculates on what human generation would have been like if the fall hadn't occurred. And I think there's actually some genuine sort of humor that Augustine sort of like lies down in here, because he's very sort of he's very subtle and kind of prefaces all of his remarks and saying that he doesn't intend to offend any of the readers. Um, and so he talks about, basically, without going into everything, he talks about how how many of the organs of man are able to be controlled by the will, and there isn't any reason why all of them wouldn't have been able to be controlled by the will at one given time. And it was, and so he kind of goes into this this illustration of that. So it's, for we move at will not only those members which are furnished with joints of solid bone, as the hands, feet, and fingers, but we move also at will those which are composed of slack and soft nerves. We can put them in motion, or stretch them out, or bend and twist them, or contract and stiffen them, as we do with the muscles of the face and mouth. The lungs, which are the very tenderest of the viscera, except the brain, and are therefore carefully sheltered in the cavity of the chest, yet for all purposes of inhaling and exhaling the breath, and of uttering and modulating the voice, are obedient to the will when we breathe, exhale, speak, shout, or sing, just as the bellows obey the smith or the organist. I will not press the fact that some animals have a natural power to move a single spot of the skin with which their whole body is covered. If they have felt on it anything they wish to drive off, like when a horse flicks its back, a power so great that by this shivering tremor of skin they can not only shake off flies that have settled on them, but even spears that have fixed in their flesh. Man, it is true, has not this power, but it is any reason of supposing that God could not give it to such creatures as he wished it to possess it, and therefore man himself also might have enjoyed even absolute power over his members had he not forfeited it by disobedience. For it was not difficult for man to form him so so that in now he moved his body only by lust should have been moved by the will. Um, and I wanted to see if
Keep it
he.
PG. Keep it PG
I
here.
will
Keep
keep
it
it PG.
PG.
I will keep it PG
You gotta
here.
you gotta watch it when you're dealing with ancient physic, as they say. You get a little
And
weird,
yeah, but
wacky.
he said Some so accurately mimic the voices of birds and beasts of other men that unless they are seen, that the difference cannot be told. Such have command of their bowels, which they can break when continuously at pleasure, so as to produce the effect of singing. I myself have known a man who is accustomed to sweat whenever he wished. It is well known that some weep when they please and shed a flood of tears, etc. But I thought that was actually I didn't know it was he had a friend who could sweat it well. I thought it was the former example of but I do think I think that there is definitely some humor there, but it kind of reminds me of a harmonious Bosch sort of picture when he's talking about all those human functions. You know, it really is, isn't it? Yeah.
There's like some guy in the corner, like he looks kind of like a bird, and he's like,
Yeah, or there's like with the bellows, you know, like just yeah.
yeah. So I had different ideas about which direction we were going to go in,
Oh,
but
sure. Well, yeah, we can. We don't have to
I
talk
kind of
about
wanted to.
Augustine's kind of grasp on classical grasp on sort of the natural sciences. But that I always find that kind of interesting. But yeah, but it would probably be more pertinent subjects to tackle.
I was going to go for sort of piggyback off the concept of faith from last week, and then
Oh, sure.
review and then read a bit of the introductory bits of the Enchiridion.
Mm. Oh yeah, I love the Enchiridion.
Yeah, and Augustine, for those who don't know, Augustine, and he's this quote is taken from the De Civitate Dei as well. It's not all about bird imitation and farts, as it turns out. Over 1,000 pages, 22 books later.
Yeah.
This is a guiding principle that the vigilant care for precise theological language. And he's accusing sort of Porphyry and the Platonists. The philosophers speak with undisciplined words, but we must speak according to a definite rule, in order that the freedom of the words may not generate false opinions concerning those things which the words signify. And so one of the interesting things too about Augustine is he's often accused of being plain, especially in comparison with St. Ambrose. But he is quite capable. I have read the dialogues, and he is quite capable of the rhetorical art and also the Confessions. That bit in the beginning, for those who have done any study of rhetoric, will see
plain?
that.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
His Latin is much easier to understand.
Oh, okay.
Than it's less Ciceronian,
right?
Or it's less. It doesn't have that sort of tendency of the late Second Sophistic or the Silver Age Latin of being very flowing and flowery and altogether a little bit too elaborate, or a little bit too brief in the sense of Tacitus. Good grief! But he's less ornate than Ambrose for sure. And anyway, in that bit that I read, he introduced the concept that we spoke of last week. Who will I believe without a preacher? As it turns out, faith comes from hearing. Man, like Calvin saying Augustinus totus noster est is just ridiculous, because he's not at all a Protestant.
It's very strange.
It's silly. Those are the words of a silly man. A silly man sending people to be burnt at the stake in the middle of Switzerland.
Well, and it seems. Well, I mean, I guess we did our fair share of burning too. You know.
Yeah, but they probably deserved it. I mean, like, come on, you gotta like. Sometimes people were getting carried away.
Yeah, it was. I mean, if the death penalty is permitted, like maybe the Pope was actually it was fine for the Pope to have a parade after St. Bartholomew's Day. Maybe, yeah, maybe that's.
Hot takes.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a hot take. Yeah.
So, the definition of faith.
Yeah.
Since we're going to talk about faith, hope, and charity,
Yeah.
let's start with faith. The act of faith, fidus actus est, ascensus supernaturalis, quo intellectus, sub imperio voluntatis, et influxu gratiae, fermitur adheret veritatibus revelatis, propter auctoritatem Dei revelantis. The act of faith is supernatural sent by which the intellect, under the command of reason and the influx of grace, firmly adheres to truths revealed on account of the authority of the God doing the revealing, or of God doing the revealing. That is the definition of faith. The correct textbook definition of faith. We're going to keep that in mind. And now I'm going to read some of the beginning portions of the Enchiridion. The true wisdom of man is piety. You find this in the book of Holy Job, for we read there that wisdom itself has said to man, "Behold the fear of the Lord, pietas, that is wisdom." If you ask further what is meant by that phrase, in that place by pietas, the Greek calls it more definitely theosebia, that is, the worship of God. The Greeks sometimes call piety eusebia, which signifies right worship, though this, of course, refers specially to the worship of God. But when we are defining in what man's true wisdom consists, the most convenient word to use is that which distinctly expresses the fear of God. And can you, who are anxious that I should treat of matters in few words, wish for a briefer form of expression? Skipping ahead a little bit. Sorry. I'm
So good, man.
When the mind has been imbued with the first elements of that faith which worketh by love, it endeavors by purity of life to attain unto sight, where the pure and perfect in heart know that unspeakable beauty, the full vision of which is supreme happiness. Here surely is an answer to your question as to what is the starting point and what the goal. We begin in faith, and we are made perfect by sight. This also is the sum of the whole body of doctrine. But the sure and proper foundation of the Catholic faith is Christ. For no other for other foundation, says the apostle, can no man lay than that is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Nor are we to deny that this is the proper foundation of the Catholic faith, because it may be supposed that some heretics hold this in common with us. For if we carefully consider the things that pertain to Christ, we shall find that, among those heretics who call themselves Christians, Christ is present in name only. Indeed and in truth, he is not among them. But to show this would occupy us too long, for we should require to go over all the heresies which have existed, which do exist, and which could exist under the Christian name, and to show that this is true in the case of each, a discussion which would occupy so many volumes as to be all but interminable.
He would have done it too if he had the time.
He really would have.
Yeah.
For you have the creed in the Lord's Prayer. What can be briefer to hear or to read? What easier to commit to memory? When, as the result of sin, the human race was groaning under a heavy load of misery and was in urgent need of the divine compassion, one of the prophets, anticipating the time of God's grace, declared, "And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered." Hence the Lord's Prayer. But the apostle, when, for the purpose of commending this very grace, he had quoted this prophetic testimony, immediately added, How then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? Hence the creed. In these two, you have those three graces exemplified. Faith believes, hope and love pray. But without faith, the two last cannot exist, and therefore we may say that faith also prays. Whence it is written, How shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? Again, can anything be hoped for which is not an object of faith? Is it true that a thing which is not an object of hope may be believed? What true Christian, for example, does not believe in the punishment of the wicked? And yet, such a one does not hope for it. And the man who believes that punishment to be hanging over himself and who shrinks in horror from the prospect is more properly said to fear than to hope. And these two states of mind the Pope carefully distinguishes when he says, "Permit the fearful to have hope." Another poet, who is usually much superior to this one, makes a wrong use of the word when he says, "If I have been able to hope for so great a grief as this." So the last two citations were from Lucan and Virgil. As some grammarians take this case as an example of impropriety of speech, saying, he said sperare instead of timere, to hope rather than to fear. Accordingly, faith may have for its object evil as well as good, for both good and evil are believed, and the faith that believes them is not evil but good. Faith, moreover, is concerned with the past, the present, and the future, all three. We believe, for example, that Christ died, an event in the past. We believe that he is sitting at the right hand of God, a state of things which is present. We believe that he will come to judge the quick and the dead, an event of the future. Again, faith applies both to one's own circumstances and those of others. Everyone, for example, believes that his own existence had a beginning and was not eternal, and he believes the same both of other men and other things. Many of our beliefs in regard to religious matters, again, have reference not merely to other men, but to angels also. But hope has for its object only what is good, only what is future, and only what affects the man who entertains the hope. For these reasons, then, faith must be distinguished from hope, not merely as a matter of verbal propriety, but because they are essentially different. The fact that we do not see either what we believe or what we hope for is all that is common to faith and hope. In the Epistle to the Hebrews, for example, faith is defined, and eminent defenders of the Catholic faith have used the definition as a standard, the evidence of things not seen. Although, should anyone say that he believes, that is, has grounded his faith not on words, nor on witnesses, nor on any reasoning whatsoever, but on the direct evidence of his own senses, he would not be guilty of such an impropriety of speech as to be justly liable to the criticism, "You saw, therefore you did not believe." And hence it does not follow that an object of faith is not an object of sight. But it is better that we should use the word faith as the scriptures have taught us, applying it to those things which are not seen. Concerning hope, again, the apostle says, hope is seen. Hope that is seen is not hope, for what a man seeth, why doth he yet hope for? But if we hope for that we do not see, then do we with patience wait for it. Excuse me. When, then, we believe that good is about to come, this is nothing else but to hope for it. Now, what shall I say of love? Without it, faith profits nothing, and in its absence, hope cannot exist. The Apostle James says, "The devils also believe and tremble." That is, they, having neither hope nor love, but believing that what we love and hope for is about to come, are in terror. And so the Apostle Paul proves and commends the faith that worketh by love, and this certainly cannot exist without hope. Wherefore, there is no love without hope, no hope without love, and neither love nor hope without faith.
Yeah, I
They
mean,
come as a package.
to be fair to our exiled pseudo brethren, I have talked with pastors about this, and they did say, yeah, well, no, there's a distinction between saving faith and like a dead faith, as James elaborates it. I mean, because they do take these scriptures, with somewhat seriousness.
The form that it's okay. So those two terms are actually really bad, and the Latin that we use in Thomas Aquinas is fides formata and fides informata. So formed faith and unformed faith,
Right.
and that which the form of faith is charity. Caritas. So it's not sola fide, and you can't just go around committing adultery. Luther.
Yeah, I haven't heard a Protestant or a Lutheran actually defend that. I mean, I think that they would
It's pretty indefensible. It's
Yeah, well, yeah.
indefensible and stupid. And so why are you doing the schism? I don't understand why you're doing the thing.
I don't understand either. I mean, I think there's just this general sort of like misnomer that we really believe that that we can merit like actual grace through our works, like that we can actually save ourselves from hell by being like super Christians without God, which like no one believes. Like it's so stupid.
But we have the Council of Trent, which says the opposite of that.
I know.
We published it.
Yeah.
In the list of things you have to believe.
Yeah.
We had a big meeting.
Yeah, I know.
It was a good one. Yeah, so it's a bit like I don't know. I always think of Lutheran pastors. It's a bit like those guys who's like they're like the Tai Chi masters who think that they can use Tai Chi to defeat someone who's done like mixed martial arts for 20 years.
Yeah,
and so
I think that's actually a really good analogy because they
get into the ring and then they just get like pummeled and they're like, no, it didn't work because the belief and they ruined my energy fields and
because they have this hermeneutic this hermeneutic weird sort of tradition where they sort of without any philosophical grounding at all. And it's really frustrating trying to talk with them.
Yeah, well,
because and then they can just kind of like since they don't
Tai Chi
have
master didn't lose the match, he just won.
Yeah, but since they don't have
like he was
any systematic beliefs too, they can just like really sort of just like flop out of like a position. It's like, oh no, I don't believe that. It's just like
escape.
Yeah, I know. So you can never pin them down. It's really annoying.
Well, but that goes back to the quote from Augustine that I had about speaking vaguely.
Right.
We must not speak vaguely so as to prevent people coming up with erroneous interpretations of our words. Vatican II.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to sort of I mean, you have to kind of bring into consideration too how much of the literature of Vatican II was really about collaborating with Protestants, and so you can kind of see how that really mentality just kind of entered. That maybe that was the smoke of Satan that entered the church, which is was that Protestant haze, of just of
sounds like a really bad Jimi Hendrix song. Lutheran haze in my face, do. Excuse me while I kiss the sky.
No, but it's gross though. Like I mean, so I grew up a Lutheran. My dad was a Lutheran pastor, and they actually knew one of the pastors who actually sat on the commission in forming of the Novus Ordo. And they're just like, oh yeah, well maybe make it a little less sacrificial, and then we'll like it more. And
like,
yeah, it's just like, oh yeah, that's okay, and yeah, it's weird. It's really weird. But I don't know. Yeah, like, but I think they really thought that this was gonna be like the new age, where like where there's gonna be this like reconciliation just by sort of, not having any clear distinctions. It's like, really no, that's not how it works. People don't just like sort of like just sort of trip over and kind of realize that they're Catholic. I mean, it's just.
I think that kind of was the idea. Was like, it's like a bar and the lights are low and then everyone gets drunk and then like everyone kind of like gets along.
Yeah.
theoretically. Well, it was
Yeah.
kind of like Woodstock. The idea was kind of like Woodstock, right? Like everyone's just going to go and sit in
Yeah.
the dirt in the field somewhere, and they're going to get along despite their differences because they're all stoned out of their minds.
Yeah.
That really seems to have been the whole idea. Like, no, if we just get everyone together
Yeah. If we do some good
and
work.
everyone's just like too whacked out of their minds to
Well, that was like the
understand
whole.
what
That was the
distinctions
like
are.
for Unitatis Red Integrio. That's literally the whole document's about. It's just like, oh yeah, well if we work side by side, then we'll be good. Just do some like charitable works together, and I mean, I guess in a way,
Well, that's a very communist concept. The concept of like, and I say communist, I mean Marxist. The
of like
or more
praxis or whatever.
Trotskyite actually. The concept of fellow travelers.
Interesting. Well, I
Trotsky
mean,
was all about sort of in literature and revolution. Trotsky speaks at length about literary fellow travelers and how there's a number of movements in Europe, especially in literary circles, that are perfectly that they can move along, and then the Bolsheviks can come and sort of usurp later what they're doing. And I mean, you saw that kind of in Ireland, right? In the formation of the Irish Republic, is that a number of them were Catholics and a number of them were the smaller number of them were Protestants, and then a significant enough number of them were Marxists. That
yeah,
that Marxist element really came out strongly after the formation of the Republic.
right. Well, yeah, I mean, but I mean that's kind of the that's why the 19th century popes were so vehemently against it, because it's a it's a denial of the essential identity of the church militant, which is to fight against error and to bring everyone into the fullness of truth without compromise. Yeah, it's not. We're not like kind of. I mean, because that's. I think there's kind of like there. I don't know if how much like an infiltration narrative. I mean, maybe that's partly there, but I think most people were kind of swept away by kind of this democratic naivete without sort of like where they sort of because they talk about culture all the time and there's no sort of um, consistent definition of what culture is in the Vatican II documents. Actually, like Tracy Rowland wrote a whole book about this, and that there's and there is kind of in the background this idea of this kind of like neutral public square that that people can sort of engage in without acknowledging that secularist forces are actually um, inimical to what the church is and what it stands for. But just, I mean, I don't.
Well, never ascribe
Yeah.
to malice what you can just easily ascribe to stupidities.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, that's what I'm trying to ascribe it to. Like, I just think that they were just like, oh yeah, because I mean,
The
there's good things
funniest
about
one is malicious stupidity.
there's, I mean, there's good things
It's a
about
sort of
this time.
ineffectual
Yeah, there's like,
Marvin the Martian.
yeah, no, but you think, but you,
I'll get you, Bugs Bunny, and then he like and then he like and then he gets handed a dynamite stick, and he's like, oh, thank you. Oh no, and then it
yeah,
explodes. It's sort
but
of
you can
like
kind of see,
that's malicious stupidity.
but you can kind of see if if you're not a very switched on person, that there is sort of like a general sort of goodness about just trying to get along and achieve common goods with the people around you. But it just but it is kind of but it is indicative of a real sort of naivete that's
Well, and it's a suboptimal situation. It really.
oh yeah, of course, yeah.
It's a suboptimal situation. It creates its own kind of difficulties, and that's what the church fathers and Augustine were arguing so vehemently against heresy.
Yeah.
Is these differences are important? That's why they were defined.
Well, yeah, I mean
Um,
that's like even the first line of Vatican II. We're talking more about Vatican II than Augustine now, but the But the first line is that the church is the and there's various translations, like whether they use, and it's partly because of the Latin, and I think this is intentional, but I've seen it translated as that the church is the instrument of human unity, or a instrument of human unity, and also the or a sacrament of salvation amongst but I think in the Vatican website, I think they've used the indefinite article for both of those direct objects now, which seems indicative of kind of the direction that the Vatican is going in general, especially with the Holy Father's most recent verbiage of evolution in the way that he talks about the development of doctrine.
So, are you talking about Sacrosanctum
No, Lumen
Concilium?
Gentium.
Lumen Gentium.
Yeah, the very first line.
The first. Okay, I have to find
It's
it.
in the first
Hold on.
paragraph.
Liturgy.
Because Lumen Gentium is the first document of Vatican II.
Yeah, they're kind of out of order here.
I'm gonna get another drink while you're finding it.
Yeah, and we could just bore every
single
one, every single non-viewer,
non-viewer,
bored out of their mind. Oh, these documents are just interminably long. Okay. So.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, though. It really is an acrobatic act for people who, I want to defend and uphold the Holy Father, like, earnestly, as much as I can. But I mean, how can you defend him using the term evolution of doctrine in one of his most recent statements, when that's something that's been explicitly denounced by, affiliates of the Communio school? But yet they're going to find a way to do it. They're going to, do some acrobatics and say, "Oh no,
this is a general problem, though, right?"
Yeah.
So, right, I'm going to read this first, and keep in mind, Latin doesn't have any articles, so they can do this the translation that you're talking about is the translation that I have. Since Christ is the light of nations, this Holy Synod, called together in the Holy Spirit, strongly desires to enlighten all people with his brightness, which gleams over the face of the church by preaching the gospel to every creature. And since the church is in Christ as a sacrament or instrumental sign of intimate union with God and of the unity of all humanity, the council, continuing the teaching of previous councils, note that, intends to declare with greater clarity to the faithful and the entire human race the nature of the church and its universal mission.
Yeah. But there's like so much
This duty of the church
unclarity in
is
the
made more
sentence.
urgent by the particular circumstances of our day, so that all people, more closely bound together as they are by social, technological, and cultural bonds, may also attain full unity in Christ. Let's read Latin.
It's just a labyrinth of hermeneutics.
Lumen gentium cum sit Christus, haec sacrosanctus synodus, in spiritu sancto congregata, omnes homines claritate eus super faciem ecclesiae resplendente, illuminari vehementer exoptat, omni creatore evangelium annunciando, cum autem ecclesia sit in Christo, veluti sacramentum, su signum et instrumentum intime cum Deo unionis, totisque generis humani unitatis, natura missionem quae suum universalum precedentium conciliorum argumento instans precius fidelibus suis et mundo universo declarare intendit. I'm just going to read that bit because the other bit, yeah, it's pretty obvious that the world has, issues and it needs Christ.
Yeah.
Here we have sacrament or instrumental sign. Here we have sacramentum, seu, or signum et instrumentum. So a sign and an instrument of intimate union with God.
Right.
And it can be a or the.
Yeah. But that's a pretty big, like, lacuna in translation. I mean, is it a sacrament of salvation or is it the sacrament of salvation?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't derive it from the text, so it could be either one, right?
I know.
And that's a point.
Well, I guess we're supposed to go with the official translation.
By the way,
Yeah.
Continuing the teaching of previous councils, Praecedentium conciliorum argumento instans.
Yeah. I mean, there seems to be some pretty obvious contradictions, especially the Council of Florence.
Yeah. Yeah, but the idea is that they are instans, that they are standing upon the decisions of previous councils, and so that means that the whole actual hermeneutic of interpretation should be
well, it's prudential
judgment. It should be neither of the schools that triumphed after the council. It should be a whole other one.
Yeah.
Neither the communio nor the, what's the other one?
Concilium.
Concilium, and neither communio nor concilium. There should be a third school of interpretation, which should be the Tridentine interpretation of the documents.
Yeah, actually, that should actually be the official school of interpreting the councils. But is there anyone who's actually done that? Is there anyone who's actually sort of gone through sort of like the whole sort of codex and tried to?
I tried to do it once. I tried to do it once with Sacrosanctum Concilium in the Latin, and it was just like it got to the part where it was like listing the advice, and I was like, I want to jump out a window.
Yeah, but yeah, instead of seeing what is sort of in line with Trent and what is prudential judgments, just going.
I think people have kind of picked here and there, but the task would involve a thorough knowledge of the documents of Trent and Vatican I.
Yeah.
And previous councils as well.
What's the status of Vatican I as an ecumenical council, as an incomplete ecumenical council? Okay, I guess so. It just doesn't have all the
pronouncements.
documents. Yeah.
obviously, and the first ones are some of my favorites. My goodness,
Hmm.
there's some great stuff in there. We're really getting far afield here, but you would have to go through uh you would have to go through oh the Vatican one. You know what? Why not? I'm gonna read the session 2, the canons. They're my faves.
Oh, okay.
If anyone denies the one true God, creator and Lord of things visible and invisible, let him be anathema. If anyone is so bold as to assert that there exists nothing besides matter, let him be anathema. If anyone says that the substance or essence of God and that of all things are one and the same, let him be anathema. If anyone says that
And the
finite things, both corporal and spiritual, or at any rate spiritual, emanated from the divine substance, or that the divine essence, by the manifestation and evolution of itself, becomes all things, or finally that God is a universal and indefinite being which by self-determination establishes the totality of things distinct in genera, species, and individuals, let him be anathema.
So that's like he's always like it's like everyone, yeah. Like, that's like Ronner and and Desjardins and just like so many people in that one anathema are just encapsulated. It's amazing.
So good.
Yeah, amazing.
If anyone does not confess that the world and all things which are contained in it, both spiritual and material, were produced according to their whole substance out of nothing by God, or holds that God did not create by his
Ah,
free will from all necessity, but as he necessarily loves himself, or denies that the world was created for the glory of God, let him be anathema.
so that really actually gets rid of like sort of. So you have to believe in intelligent design then, as a Catholic.
Mhm.
Yeah.
2, on Revelation.
At least intelligent design, yeah.
If anyone says that the one true God, our Creator and Lord, cannot be known with certainty from the things which have been made by the natural light of human reason, let him be anathema. If anyone says that it is impossible or not expedient that human beings should be taught by means of divine revelation about God and the worship that should be shown him, let him be anathema. If anyone says that a human being cannot be divinely elevated to a knowledge and perfection which exceeds the natural, but of himself can and must reach finally the possession of all truth and goodness by continual development, let him be anathema. If anyone does not receive as sacred and canonical the complete books of sacred scripture with all their parts as the Holy Council of Trent listed them, or denies that they were divinely inspired, let him be anathema.
Who are you thinking of there?
Oh man, I don't know. Just this is good stuff. It's
It
a
is
shame the
good.
Franco-Prussian War interrupted this because this was Vatican I was the bee's knees, kids. This is
Yeah.
good stuff.
Yeah.
On faith.
Mm.
If anyone says that human reason is so independent that faith cannot be commanded by God, let him be anathema. If anyone says that divine faith is not to be distinguished from natural knowledge about God and moral matters, and consequently that for divine faith it is not required that revealed truth should be believed because of the authority of God who reveals it, let him be anathema. Oh, look, that definition of faith. If anyone says that divine revelation cannot be made credible by external signs, and that therefore men and women ought to be moved to faith only by each one's internal experience or private inspiration, let him be anathema.
Yeah, that's a clear dig at what's his name, the Kant's disciple.
If anyone
I forget his
says
name.
that all miracles are impossible, and that therefore all reports of them, or even those contained in sacred scripture, are to be set aside as fables or myths, or that miracles can never be known with certainty, nor can the divine origin of the Christian religion be proved from them, let him be anathema.
Actually, that kind of brings me to a topic that I wanted to discuss before. So, as I think as Catholics, we are actually um, bound to believe in at least some kind of flood, like whether it's a regional or a global flood.
I would like to reserve this for a future show.
All right, we'll do that.
Because I have actually a large amount of things to say on this subject.
All right. Yeah, we can do a whole episode on that.
And I want to finish reading these delightful bullet points.
Okay, good.
If anyone says that the assent to Christian faith is not free, but is necessarily produced by arguments of human reason, or that the grace of God is necessary only for living faith, which works by charity, let him be anathema. If anyone says that the condition of the faithful and those who have not yet attained to the only true faith is alike, so that Catholics may have a just cause for calling in doubt by suspending their assent the faith which they have already received from the teaching of the Church, until they have completed a scientific demonstration of the credibility and truth of their faith, let him be anathema. Right? So no systematic skepticism.
No.
Fides quaerens intellectum. Now, on faith and reason. If anyone says that in divine revelation there are contained no true mysteries properly so called, but that all the dogmas of the faith can be understood and demonstrated by properly trained reason from natural principles, let him be anathema.
This seems like a very sort of obscure amount of people who would believe that. Like, this seems like kind of like what Peter Abelard believed or whatever.
There were more heretics of different kinds in the 19th century.
Yeah.
If anyone says that human studies, hey, listen, cocaine was legal, okay? If anyone says that human studies are to be treated with such a degree of liberty that their assertions may be maintained as true even when they are opposed to divine revelation, and that they may not be forbidden by the Church, let him be anathema.
Who are you particularly rejoicing?
Guess what? Georgetown University and other Jesuit institutions. You suck and you're not Catholic.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, heretics. You're heretics.
Yeah.
Look.
Look. Yeah. Right there.
It's right in the book.
I mean, but it should be self-evident. I mean, they don't believe in the deposit of faith.
Hey, that was condemned earlier.
Nice, yeah.
If anyone says that it is possible that at some time, given the advancement of knowledge, a sense may be assigned to the dogmas propounded by the Church, which is different from that which the Church has understood and understands, let him be anathema. Who could this apply to? We'll just leave that as an
sure, yeah.
open question.
More prudent, yeah.
What a delightful council. The rest of the council was occupied with the papal infallibility stuff, and then there was a war, and so sadly they didn't get to finish everything.
Yeah, I know.
Just too bad, because that's a strong opener right there.
Yeah.
I should read that. I should read the bit that closes that. It's just, it's so good. There's some like ultra trads disparaging Vatican I or whatever, and I want them to know that they're wrong.
Yeah, I think that their main thing is against the papal infallibility thing. That seems to be sort of the bone of contention.
And so, in the performance of our supreme pastoral office, we beseech for the love of Jesus Christ, and we command, by the authority of him who is also our God and Savior, all faithful Christians, especially those in authority or have the duty of teaching, that they contribute their zeal and labor to the warding off and elimination of these errors from the Church and to the spreading of the light of the pure faith. But since it is not enough to avoid the contamination of heresy, unless those errors are carefully shunned which approach in a greater or less degree, we warn all of their duty to observe the constitutions and decrees in which such wrong opinions, though not expressly mentioned in this document, have been banned and forbidden by this Holy See. That's how you talk. That's how you talk when you're the successor of St. Peter.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't be a couch potato.
Don't be a couch potato.
Oh man.
Oh, such good stuff. Anyway, we somehow got from St. Augustine to Vatican I. I'm not actually that surprised, but delightful.
Mm-hmm. Well, it makes sense that we're going from the Enchiridion to Vatican I. I mean, that seems like a very sort of coherent stream of consciousness.
Continuous line of doctrinal development.
Yeah, exactly. That's real doctrinal development. Not just some
Augustine,
gross like evolution.
And I'm sure is proud.
Some Lovecraftian evolution. Just like
yeah. Let's try not to be negative on the end of the show. We're supposed to be a festival of conviviality, John.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look at us, Jim. We're a festival of conviviality.
$17.76. More than enough.
I would like to point out that Americanism is the last officially condemned heresy.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's actually very fitting for our time.
RESPECT, respect authority, OBEY, obey authority. Come on, respect authority, come on, obey authority, come on.
We're talking about doctrine and about the magisterium.
Yeah. Save them all for the end. Yeah. So, anyway.
Yeah,
the moral of the story is that we should learn our faith.
Yeah.
Backwards and forwards. And one good way to do that is by reading St. Augustine.
Yep.
Check this out, y'all. Read a book, read a book, read a book, read a book. READABOOK.
I think, yeah, we pretty much got all the memes there. But yeah, actually, I think the Enchiridion is probably the first Augustine that book that people should read. That or on Christian doctrine, but it's hard. This is a toss up for me.
De Doctrina Christiana is a little bit difficult for people to come to because it is actually a treatise on rhetoric.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah,
and it's a book about why you should learn grammar and language, so that you
I know. I mean, but that is kind of
come up with stupid things to say and think.
But that's where he outlines, you know, the same canon that's in Trent as well,
Mm-hmm.
and it does have, and there's also, you know, some great stuff in there on sort of God's nature and about. Yeah, and but it does kind of have like sort of like the whole sort of like basis for like liberal learning in there as well. So it's more difficult to come to, but it is something that's in a way actually more fundamental even than the Enchiridion. The Enchiridion is probably easier to understand though.
One of the mistakes people make reading the Confessions is not understanding what he's doing in the Confessions, and he's being very rhetorical, and he sets up these very interesting paradoxes for you to think about.
Yeah,
he's not disparaging education, and he says so very explicitly. He's disparaging those who abuse education.
In the Confessions.
he's not, in the Confessions, he's not disparaging temporal things. He's disparaging those who abuse temporal things, the disorder, and he's disparaging the disorder, especially the disorder that he regrets having.
Yeah, it's kind of funny though, because he does like sort of we would sort of like kind of even though it's anachronistic, we would kind of take some of the conclusions that he holds to be sort of like extremely puritanical, like when he sort of considers it, you know, a great sin to sort of like be listening to sort of like the music of what's happening at the mass without listening to the you know, the words of the liturgy, you know, or to be sort of, you know, distracted by sort of seeing a hawk chasing a mouse or something like that, you know.
Well, it's from the schools of rhetoric, though. He's setting up a sort of rhetorical.
Sure, yeah, but I mean, I don't know, at first blush, you know, that would sort of, you know, seem to be sort of a I don't know, sort of a I don't know, I suppose like sort of like a common interpretation is that his sort of Manichaean sort of a youth sort of led him to sort of swerve in sort of the opposite extreme, which I don't think is necessarily true.
No, it's not true at all. It's that is a stupid way of reading Augustine. No, it is.
Right,
It is
yeah.
a stupid way of reading Augustine that completely ignores historical facts
Right.
about Augustine. The fact that he's a rhetorician, what that rhetoric consists in,
Yeah.
the way that people communicate in the century in which he's living.
Well, yeah.
You look at the
that he
contemporary,
is-
like if you look at the contemporary stuff, it's just like high flown rhetoric in every direction. I mean, for goodness sake, go several centuries earlier and read the Tusculan Disputations of Cicero. Cicero presents these very beautiful arguments, but we know he's skeptical of a number of things. But he presents these arguments, and he gives them, and he gives fair play to his opponents as well. He often does give fair play to his opponents as well. But he engages in all sorts of rhetorical tricks. That's the way that people talked.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think it's I just think that most of us are a bit too thick to sort of to take sort of a nuanced view on some of these illusions that he's referring to, at least in an initial way. I think you kind of need to have your hand held a little bit, and you know, and it's yeah. I mean,
Augustine should always be read sort of next to your Thomas Aquinas.
yeah, I think so too. Yeah. I mean, the Confessions is just, but it's probably one of my favorite books ever. I mean,
It's an unparalleled book. I've read it many times. I've taken courses on it. I'm listening right now to a priest from Brazil lecturing on it.
It's probably like, I mean, especially like the dialogue that he has with his mother when she's about to die. You know, I mean, that's one of the most beautiful things ever written. Really, it's incredible.
Every time I go over it,
Yeah.
and the bit I'm listening to now,
Yeah.
and anyone who can follow basic Latin, really head over to Literae Christianae. Literae Christianae. It's an excellent podcast. I can't remember things, man.
Litera Christiane?
No, it'd be Literae.
Oh yeah, because they're both in.
Yeah, Literae Christianae. Father Matteo is a
Letter of Christians.
excellent sort of living Latin speaker, and he does all sorts of topics, but he has a number of ones that he's done on the Confessions as well. It's the whole podcast is in Latin, so like I say, if you have a decent grasp of Latin, head over there. He does lower level podcasts, an easy Latin on sacred history. So going through the Vulgate. So those are good too. So anyone trying to learn Latin, that is a good place for one to go. And he does these, he's going over the Latin in the text. It's like, this is actually really amazing. Like, I never noticed this. And I read most of it in Latin like a couple years ago. You know, and but you have to go over the text as they say in Latin, per legere. You have to read it and then reread it, and then sometimes someone else picks up on something, and you go, "That's really interesting." Just the way that he phrases it, and yeah, the choice of words and the way the sentence is constructed, you can really see in the Latin. You can really see the rhetorician's art. It's absolutely incredible. I think that translation I was reading earlier, which was by W. Watts, which is the old Loeb translation. I think that the older translations capture a bit of that, but
there's actually a decent new translation from a Catholic one, because you really should actively avoid the Protestant translations, because sometimes they try to sort of ameliorate Augustine to themselves more. Trying to find it here on my shelf, but yeah, it's they're definitely, don't read a Protestant translation of Augustine. Bad news. Yeah, it's Maria Bolding is the one that is the kind of well-known sort of Catholic translation for a contemporary translation. But remember,
you will receive your reward in purgatory.
Good night, everyone.